My name is Lily Hart, and the night everything shifted began with a simple call to my mother to ask where she kept the homeowner's insurance documents. I heard the click when she picked up, but not the one when she was supposed to hang up. A second later, their voices bled through, my mom, my dad, and my sister Emma laughing like I wasn't even real. "She's a burden," my mother said casually. "Once we're back from Japan, we'll have her sign the house over to Emma. She's soft. Just push her a little." My dad hummed in agreement. Emma giggled. "Yeah, she'll fold. She always does." I froze in the center of the $1 million home I bought with my own money, every brick earned, every upgrade paid for in silence. And in that silence, something inside me finally stopped begging to be seen. I didn't confront them. I didn't cry. I just started planning. Before I continue my story, can I ask, where are you watching from tonight? I hope I'm not the only one who's ever felt this alone. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, in a neighborhood where the lawns were patchy, the paint on the houses peeled through every winter, and our own home, an aging two-bedroom box with creaking floors, always smelled faintly of dust and yesterday's coffee. My parents used to say it had character, but even as a kid I understood it was just old, tired, and held together by whatever my dad could fix with duct tape. What it didn't have was space, especially for someone like me. My sister Emma, 2 years younger, was the sunbeam of the family. Pretty, charming, loud enough to fill every room with her confidence. Teachers adored her. Neighbors complimented her. Relatives bragged about her grades, her looks, her potential. My mother would beam, smoothing Emma's hair as if touching proof of perfection. "Our pride and joy," she'd say. "She's going places." Then there was me, quiet, awkward, better with books than with people. I learned early that invisibility kept the house peaceful. If Emma was the pride, I was the reminder of everything my parents wished was different. My mother's tone made that clear in ways that never needed yelling. "Lily, don't be difficult. Lily, don't make things harder. Lily, your sister is trying. You should learn from her." Every critique felt casual, almost gentle, as if she truly believed I was the problem that needed fixing, not a child who needed to be understood. By the time I was 10, comparisons weren't just implied, they were spoken like facts. If Emma forgot her homework, it was because she had so much on her plate. If I forgot mine, it was because I was scatterbrained. When Emma slammed a door during an argument, my mother said she was expressive. When I quietly asked for space, I was dramatic. I learned to shrink myself to avoid disappointing them further, to make my needs small, my voice smaller, my presence easiest to ignore. But shrinking never made me enough, not in their eyes. My father didn't help. He wasn't cruel, not intentionally. But he moved through the world as if emotions were chores he never signed up for. His approval was rare, his affection perfunctory. And it always flowed more freely toward Emma. "She's special," he'd say in moments he thought I couldn't hear. "She's going to bring honor to this family." As if the family needed saving, and I wasn't capable of doing any of it. The message ran clear through my entire childhood. Emma was the investment. I was the expense. I remember one afternoon when I was 13, sitting at the dinner table, clutching a report card full of A's. I had worked for weeks, studied late into the night, hoping naively that maybe this time they would notice. Emma burst through the front door, carrying a flyer announcing she'd been chosen to perform a solo at her dance recital. My mother squealed, hugging her, calling her our shining star. My report card sat on the table until Dad pushed it aside to make room for dessert plates. No one asked about it. No one even glanced at it. I took it to my room and folded it into a drawer, where it stayed for years. It was the first time I realized that I could work twice as hard and still be half as visible. The only place where that imbalance didn't exist was my grandfather's house, just 10 minutes away, but an entirely different universe. His backyard smelled of pine and clean dirt, his kitchen always warm with the scent of cinnamon bread. Grandpa, with his steady hands and slow, thoughtful speech, treated me like a person with a mind worth hearing. He never compared me to Emma. Never asked why I wasn't louder, prettier, more confident. He simply let me be. He'd tap the table with his knuckle whenever I doubted myself and say, "Lily, effort is worth more than applause. Anyone can clap for a moment, Not everyone builds a life. Those words became my anchor. In his small, cluttered study filled with old maps and film cameras, he taught me how to pay attention to numbers, to people, to patterns, to myself. He made space for the version of me no one else cared to see. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on his old corduroy couch while he read, the lamp flickering gently, the world quiet for once. I felt safe there, truly safe in a way the house I grew up in never allowed. For a long time, I believed he was exaggerating when he said I had strength, resilience, and the kind of mind that could build something meaningful someday. But I clung to his words anyway, a promise of a future different from the present I lived in. Those early cracks in my childhood didn't break me, but they shaped me into someone who learned to walk quietly, to work silently, to survive without expecting anything in return. The funny thing is, when you grow up being treated like a burden, you start believing disappearing is the kindest thing you can do for everyone, even when disappearing is the last thing you deserve. I didn't know it then, but every small hurt, every dismissal, every time I was told to be grateful for your sister, all of it was preparing me for the moment years later, when I would stand alone in a house I bought with my own hands, and hear the people who raised me call me a burden again. My grandfather passed away on a cold November morning when I was 24. The world outside our window had already turned gray, the mountains dusted with early snow, and for the first time in my life I felt a silence that didn't comfort me. His house, once warm, alive, vibrating with the gentle hum of his routines, felt hollow, emptied of the one person who had ever truly seen me. When the lawyer handed me the envelope marked with his handwriting, my throat tightened so hard I couldn't speak. Inside were two things: a letter and the beginnings of a new life I didn't yet know how to accept. The letter was short, written on the same yellow notepad he always used. Lily, hard work deserves a foundation. This is for your first home. Not for the family, not for anyone else. For you. The second item was a document describing a trust fund, not enormous, but significant, and a separate savings account he had quietly built over the years. I didn't understand at first why he left it all to me. Emma had always been the favorite. Logic said she should have been the one inheriting anything worth value. But then I reread the letter, slowly, realizing it wasn't about favoritism. It was about recognition. He saw how hard I fought to build a life without applause. He saw what no one else cared to see. When the estate settled, I suddenly had enough to do something I had never imagined possible: buy a home. A real home. Something solid, something mine. For months after his funeral, I worked double shifts, saved every penny, and studied the housing markets in different states. Seattle called to me in a way I couldn't explain: clean air, ocean views, job opportunities, a chance to start somewhere my past couldn't follow me so easily. I combined my savings with the trust, took calculated risks, and by the time I was 26, I held the keys to a modern 3-bedroom house overlooking Lake Union. It was valued at nearly $1 million, the kind of property people twice my age struggled to afford. When I first walked through it, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors, I whispered, "Grandpa, I did it," feeling him there in the quiet. But the moment I shared the news with my parents, the air shifted. My mother didn't congratulate me. She didn't ask to see pictures. Her first reaction: $1 million? Lily, that's excessive for someone like you. Why didn't you talk to us before you made a decision that big? My father's response was a simple grunt. Neither impressed nor supportive. Only Emma reacted with excitement, though it was the kind that made my stomach twist. "Oh my God, that place must have so much space. I've always wanted to live in Seattle for a while. Maybe I can stay with you until I settle in." She said it casually, as though the house naturally included her. As though every achievement of mine had always been a stepping stone for her future. At first, I laughed it off, assuming she was joking. But she wasn't. Within weeks, my mother began bringing it up in conversations. "It's just practical. Emma is still figuring things out. She shouldn't waste money on rent in such an expensive city. And you're alone, Lily. That house is too big for one person." My father chimed in with quiet agreement, like this was common sense rather than entitlement. The pressure wasn't loud, but it was persistent, like water dripping slowly on stone until it shapes it. I refused, gently but firmly. I want to live alone. I bought the house for myself. That was the first time my mother's expression toward me changed from mild disappointment to something sharper, almost offended. Lily, you sound selfish. Emma has always supported you. The least you can do is share what you have. I didn't point out that Emma had never supported me. I didn't say that she mocked my quietness, used my achievements as background noise, or took credit for things she had no part in. I didn't remind them that I had built my savings from years of work, budgeting, sacrifice, and a grandfather who believed in me. I simply said, no. This is my home. But to them, that wasn't a boundary. That was betrayal. Emma stopped calling me. My mother grew cold. My father became irritated whenever I visited. Thanksgiving that year was the first time I felt like a guest rather than family. Conversations paused when I entered the room, Emma's friends whispering, my mother rolling her eyes whenever I mentioned Seattle. She thinks she's better than us. She muttered once, not realizing I was standing in the hallway. Just because she has a house. It's in like Heim with hay in way in Notters. My parents treated Emma's future as something the entire family should lift up, but my own successes? They were inconveniences, making them uncomfortable, reminding them I had built a life without their handprints on it. That was the first real fracture, the moment I realized love in our household always came with conditions. Still, I tried to soften things. I invited them to visit, I offered to host holidays. I brought gifts, tried to bridge the widening gap. But nothing changed. If anything, their resentment grew sharper, more obvious. To my mother, it was simple math. Emma was the chosen one. And I was the one who should support her. One evening, months after I had settled into my Seattle home, my mother called and said, you know, Lily, it wouldn't hurt to put Emma's name on the deed. Just for security. She said it the way someone might offer advice about weatherproofing windows, something supposedly reasonable, helpful, normal. I felt a coldness spread in my chest. I'm not doing that, I replied. Her silence lasted a beat too long. I'm disappointed in you. Truly disappointed. It was the first time in my life she had said those words outright. And all at once, I understood, in her eyes, everything I did that didn't revolve around Emma was betrayal. Buying a home? Betrayal. Setting boundaries? Betrayal. Having something of my own? The worst betrayal of all. I ended the call slowly, forcing my hands to stay steady. I stood in the center of my living room, and thought of my grandfather. He had known this might happen. He had known my family well enough to create a trust that protected me from them. He had known they would see what I built not as mine, but as theirs to inherit. And for the first time, a tiny part of me wondered whether the distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was inevitable. What I didn't yet realize was that their resentment hadn't peaked, it was only beginning. The house that was supposed to be the start of my independence would soon become the battleground for everything that followed. And the people who should have been proud of me would turn that accomplishment into the very thing they thought they were entitled to take. Grandpa left me a foundation. My family saw it as an opportunity. And that misunderstanding would shatter everything. The shift didn't happen all at once. It crept in slowly, like fog rolling over a coastline, quiet at first, then so thick I could no longer see where my boundaries ended and their expectations began. The first sign was the unannounced visits. At the beginning, I tried to be gracious. My parents had never been the type to respect personal space, but I thought maybe the distance between Salt Lake City and Seattle would change that. It didn't. Instead, I would come home from work to find my mother's shoes by the door, my father flipping through channels on my couch, and Emma taking selfies in my kitchen. No warning. No text. No sense that this was invasive in any way. Oh, Lily, we were just in the area. My mother would chirp, as though the area included a 12-hour drive or a 2-hour flight. Sometimes they stayed an hour, sometimes the whole afternoon. Sometimes they brought Emma. Sometimes they brought Emma's friends. And every time, there was this quiet, creeping feeling in my stomach like my home wasn't mine anymore, but a place they merely allowed me to occupy. Still, I kept my voice calm. Mom, Dad, you need to tell me before coming over. But my mother would wave a hand, laughing as if I were joking. Lily, honey, we're family. You don't need to be so formal. My father would nod, adding, "Besides, this house has plenty of room. It's good someone is using it, someone." As if I weren't the one paying the mortgage, the utilities, the taxes, as if this home existed outside of me belonging to some collective idea of family, where my role was simply to maintain it until the rightful owner stepped forward. The second sign was worse. One Saturday morning, months after their visit started, my mother showed up with two strangers in tow, both carrying notebooks and measuring tapes. "These are decorators," she announced proudly, brushing past me as if she owned the place. "I want them to see what we're working with." I stared at her, stunned. "Working with? Mom, for what?" She gave me a pitying look, the kind that stripped me of adulthood in an instant. "Lily, look at this space. It's beautiful, but it's being wasted. A house this nice should go to someone who knows how to use it. Someone who will bring people together. Someone who makes the family look good." Her eyes drifted deliberately toward Emma, who walked in behind her in oversized sunglasses, holding a matcha latte like she was stepping into her future home. She did a slow spin in the doorway, taking in the open-concept living room, the lake glimmering beyond the glass windows. "Yeah," Emma said lightly, smiling as if she could already see herself hosting parties here. "I could totally make this place work." My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Mom, this is my house." End quote. But she had already moved on, explaining paint swatches to the decorators, discussing potential renovations, talking about where Emma's piano could go. Even though Emma hadn't played piano since middle school. The decorators took notes, while my own mother gestured confidently around my home as though she were giving a tour to potential buyers. My father arrived an hour later, carrying a clipboard with printouts of property taxes and home value projections. "I've been thinking," he said, in the tone he used when he believed he was being logical. "This house is too big for you alone, Lily. You don't need 3 bedrooms. It might be wise to transfer partial ownership to Emma. You know, for her future. For the family's stability. For her future. Not mine." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. None came. "Dad," I said slowly, "I bought this house. With my money." "Yes," he replied, nodding as if agreeing with me strengthened his point. "Exactly. You used your inheritance and your savings. But Emma doesn't have those advantages. She needs help. And as the older sister, it's your responsibility to set her up for success." My responsibility. Not my parents'. Not Emma's own. Mine. The decorators left after 2 hours, promising to send mood boards. My parents stayed for dinner without asking, and my mother ended the night with, "Just think about it, Lily. Giving Emma partial ownership would show you really care about this family." I didn't sleep that night. Not because their request surprised me, but because of how unsurprised I was. It was as though every moment of my childhood had been pointing toward this exact dynamic, Emma wanting, my parents expecting, and me sacrificing. What was different now was the scale. This wasn't a toy, or attention, or praise. This was my life's biggest accomplishment. And they viewed it as a communal asset simply because I had been the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who would never push back hard enough to cause conflict. Over the next few weeks, the narrative spread through the family like wildfire, mostly because Emma spread it herself. I learned from a cousin's Facebook post that she had announced, publicly, "I'll be moving to Seattle soon. My sister has a house and we've been planning it for months." She said it casually, confidently, like the decision had already been made. Like my consent was irrelevant. At first, relatives congratulated me, messaging things like, "So generous of you," or, "What a loving sister you are." Some didn't even bother to message me at all. They simply congratulated Emma on her move, as though the house already belonged to her. Every time I corrected someone, they reacted with confusion. "I thought that was the plan? Your mom said you were giving the house to Emma, eventually. Your sister said your house is practically hers." And behind their words, I heard a truth my family had never said outright, but had always acted upon. They didn't see my accomplishments as mine. They saw them as a resource for Emma. The final crack came when Emma posted an Instagram story from my living room standing in front of the panoramic window overlooking the lake, captioned, future home loading. No emoji. No joke. No question mark. Just entitlement, wrapped in gold sunlight. That was the moment the fog finally lifted. For the first time, I saw my family not as flawed people with poor boundaries, but as people who believed, fundamentally, that what I built belonged to them. That my role wasn't to prosper, but to provide. That my success was never meant to free me, it was meant to feed them. And what terrified me most wasn't their selfishness. It was how fully they believed I would comply. They didn't see a daughter with a life of her own. They saw a silent resource. A placeholder. A stepping stone. A burden they could shake loose once Emma no longer needed what I had. And they had no idea their final miscalculation was coming. I wasn't going to give them this house. I wasn't going to give them anything ever again. When my mother's birthday approached that year, I tried one last time to mend the widening, silent rift between us. Despite everything, the unannounced visits, the decorators she brought without permission, the hints and pressure about giving Emma my house, I still wanted connection. I still wanted, stupidly, for her to look at me the way she looked at Emma, with pride, softness, belonging. So, I gave her something meaningful, a generous check, meant to fund the trip to Tokyo she'd always dreamed of. She cried when she opened it, not the cold, irritated tears I had come to know, but real ones. For a moment, her arms wrapped around me, and I let myself believe she saw me. That she appreciated me. That maybe there was still a version of us that could be repaired. They left for Japan the next week, my mother, my father, and Emma. The photos started immediately. Cherry blossoms. Street markets. Emma posing in a kimono she absolutely didn't pay for. My mother captioning everything with family time. As though I didn't exist. But I ignored the sting. I told myself this was just how they were, thoughtless, maybe selfish, but not malicious. I kept working. I kept building my life. I kept trying to be someone they might one day value. Then came the call. It was a Tuesday evening. The sky outside my window was streaked with lavender. Seattle was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums warm around you. I dialed my mother to ask about where she kept the homeowner's insurance documents. Mundane, necessary, absolutely harmless. She picked up, distracted, the background noise of a busy Tokyo street spilling into the line. Lily, can this wait? We're about to sit down for dinner. Just a second, I said. I just need to know which folder. And then, it happened again. The click. The silence. The absence of the second click, the one that should have ended the call. I didn't notice at first. I set my phone down on the counter as I sorted through a drawer. But then I heard them. Crisp, shockingly clear. My mother's voice floated through the speaker, cheerful and cold in its ease. After the trip, we'll tell her it's time to transfer the house, Mom said, as if she were discussing paint colors or tax paperwork. She won't fight. She never fights. I wasn't gone. My father hummed in agreement. We need to make sure Emma's future is secured. That house is perfect for her. Emma giggled, a sound that had always been sweet, until now. Honestly, she's lucky to even have it. Grandpa gave her money at the perfect time. Total luck. She didn't earn that house. The words hit harder than I expected. I leaned my palms against the countertop, the smooth stones suddenly cold beneath my skin. My mother's voice returned, sharper this time. She's soft. If she cries a little, she'll sign anything. You just have to push her the right way. She's our daughter. But let's be honest. Lily has always been. A burden. A burden. Said so easily. Said with laughter. Said like it was fact, documented somewhere I had never seen. Emma's voice chimed in. It's basically mine already. She just doesn't know it yet. They laughed. All three of them. The sound layered and cruel, and yet so normal for them it was almost gentle. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there in the middle of the house I had bought with my own sweat and long nights and relentless work. This place had been my sanctuary. My proof that I could build a life outside their shadow. My grandfather's final gift turned into something solid, something real. And there they were, halfway across the world, plotting how to take it from me. Expecting me to hand it over with gratitude. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was that they believed it. Truly believed it. In their story, I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a woman who had built something meaningful. I wasn't even a person with boundaries. I was a soft spot they could press, a resource they could harvest, a placeholder until Emma stepped into the life she felt entitled to. I picked up the phone slowly, staring at their names glowing on the screen as their voices continued. The restaurant noise behind them blurred into a distant ocean. I could end the call. I could scream. I could cry. I could confront them with the truth of what I had overheard. But something inside me shifted quietly, suddenly, permanently. A line snapped. A door closed. A veil lifted. I didn't hang up right away. I listened just long enough to hear the version of me they had constructed for themselves. The Lily who was weak. The Lily who was lucky, not capable. The Lily who owed her life, her achievements, her future to their approval. Then I pressed the screen, ending the call without a word. For a long moment, I stood in the center of the house. My house. The walls seemed to hum differently now. Everything familiar felt newly sharpened. I wasn't broken. I wasn't hurt beyond repair. I was awake. They hadn't crushed me. They had clarified me. And clarity, true clarity, isn't gentle. It's fuel. In that moment, I realized I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their understanding. I didn't need them to love me the way they loved Emma. I needed one thing: distance. Not emotional distance. Not temporary distance. Real distance. I needed a plan not to fight them, but to free myself. And for the first time in my life, I understood exactly how I would do it. The morning after that call, I woke up with a clarity I had never felt before. It wasn't anger, not the kind that burns hot and loud. It was something quieter, steadier, colder. A realization that the people who raised me had finally said the part out loud. I was not a daughter to them. I was leverage. A placeholder, a soft target. And now that I knew this truth without doubt, there was only one path left, one my grandfather had unknowingly prepared me for long before he died. I spent that morning researching property attorneys in Seattle, scrolling through reviews and firm websites until I found someone who specialized in real estate and asset protection. Her name was Carmen Willis, sharp eyes, reputation for being ruthless in court, and known for helping people who needed to disappear from toxic entanglements. I booked the earliest appointment available. Walking into her office a few days later felt like stepping into another world. Clean lines, quiet confidence, documents neatly stacked in symmetrical piles. Carmen greeted me with a handshake firm enough to ground me. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. I told her about the unannounced visits, the decorators my mother brought, the family's expectation that Emma would move in, the pressure to put my sister on the deed, the trip to Japan funded by my birthday gift, and finally the phone call, the words that cracked the last piece of hope I had left. When I finished, Carmen leaned back, interlacing her fingers. "First," she said, "you need to understand something very clearly. Your home is yours. 100%. It's in your name only. Unless you willingly sign a transfer, your family has absolutely no legal claim to this property." She let that settle in the air before continuing. "Second, what they're planning, this idea of pressuring you to sign ownership over, isn't just manipulative, it's borderline coercive. But the good news is, you're not powerless here. You can protect yourself without confrontation. You can exit the situation entirely." Something about the way she said exit made my breath catch. It wasn't an escape rooted in fear, it was an escape rooted in power. In choice. I nodded slowly. "I want out," I whispered. "All the way out." Carmen smiled small, approving. "Then we'll do this cleanly, quietly, legally. They won't be able to touch you after." And so, the plan began. Step 1. Sell the house off market. Fast, discreet. Through Carmen, I was connected to a private real estate group that specialized in corporate acquisitions. A tech startup in Seattle was looking for a property to convert into an executive residence or team retreat space. They wanted something modern, private, move-in ready. My home was perfect. Within a week, they toured it. Within 2, they made an offer. No open house. No listing online. No paper trail for my family to track. I accepted. Step 2. Restructure my finances. Carmen introduced me to someone who could help create an LLC, Heartline Holdings, a name neutral enough that it wouldn't raise suspicion. I transferred the proceeds from the upcoming sale into the LLC's account. Then I opened new personal accounts in a different bank entirely, closing the ones my family knew about. New debit card. New credit card. New PINs. New passwords. New email. New phone number. I was erasing the version of me they could reach. Step 3. Pack only what belonged to me. Walking through the house, choosing what to keep, what to leave, what to throw away, it was surreal. There were items my mother had insisted I buy to make the house look presentable. Items Emma mocked me for choosing. Items I had purchased to win their approval. I left all of it behind. If it represented them, if it reminded me of being less than, if it was bought out of pressure rather than desire, it stayed. I packed only what felt like mine. My books. My laptop. The framed photo of my grandfather and me. A quilt he had given me when I turned 18. Clothes. A few pieces of jewelry, my documents. Everything else, hundreds of items, was irrelevant to the life I was about to build. Step 4. Handle their belongings. At first glance, it seemed absurd that my family had personal belongings in my home. But over the years, my mother had left decorative items, my father had stashed tools, Emma had stored boxes of seasonal clothes she never came back for. If they believed the house belonged to them, then naturally they treated the space like a storage unit. So I hired a moving company. Not to return the items, not to discard them, but to store them far away. A warehouse in Boise, Idaho, agreed to take the shipment, neutral territory, completely out of their reach. Carmen advised using that location for one simple reason: if my family wanted the items back, they would have to work through legal channels, not emotional manipulation. And I wanted everything routed through legality now. No more begging. No more guilt. Step 5. Buy a one-way ticket. I chose Colorado for reasons I couldn't articulate at first. Maybe it was the mountains, maybe the fresh start. Maybe the echo of my grandfather's love for open landscapes and quiet spaces where a person could breathe. Boulder felt right. Distant but not unreachable. New but not overwhelming. I booked a 6-month lease on a small apartment overlooking the Flatirons. It wasn't luxurious, not compared to my Seattle house, but it was mine in the way that mattered most. It held no ghosts. When the house sale closed, I received the confirmation email with a final number: $1,025,000 deposited into Heartline Holdings. And with that, the last string tying me to the life my family believed they controlled finally snapped. The sale of the house happened the same way everything in my life had been happening lately, quietly, invisibly, without a ripple reaching the people who believed they controlled my world. There was no for sale sign hammered into the lawn, no real estate flyers slid into mailboxes, no curious neighbors asking questions. The tech company's acquisition team arrived in 2 unmarked SUVs, toured the house with professional detachment, nodded at the structural reports Carmen had prepared, and finalized their offer in less than 48 hours. The paperwork moved even faster. We closed in a private conference room inside a downtown Seattle law office, a space overlooking the water, the city just beginning to light itself awake. There was no celebration, no toast to milestones, no sentimentality. Just signatures, initials, and a woman in a navy blazer sliding documents across a table polished to a sheen. When everything was done, she handed me a simple folder. Inside was the final statement: proceeds deposited to Heartline Holdings LLC, $1,025,000. $1 million. Earned through a lifetime of work, discipline, sacrifice. Protected now finally from the people who had spent years trying to take it. I felt, not joy, exactly. Not relief. Something steadier. Like the ground beneath me had solidified after years of shifting sand. Carmen looked at me with that cool, approving gaze of hers. "You did everything right," she said. "From here on, your life is yours, mine. Not ours. Not theirs. Mine." With the house legally transferred, I moved through the next steps of my plan with machine-like precision. The money went straight into the LLC account, never touching my old banks. I closed every personal account my family had ever known existed. Checking, savings, the credit card my mother guilted me into opening with her years ago. in case of emergencies. I deleted the email parents used to forward inspirational quotes or subtle criticisms. I changed my phone number, wiping away decades of accessibility. I even updated my digital footprint, privacy settings, passwords, subscriptions, forwarding addresses. I wasn't running. I was shedding. Everything they once used to reach me was gone. The apartment in Boulder was small, barely 700 square feet, but it had large windows and morning light that poured in like forgiveness. When the leasing agent asked how long I planned to stay, I said, 6 months, even though I had no real idea. It felt like a trial period with the new version of myself. I sent the deposit electronically, using the LLC to sign the paperwork. No one, not my parents, not Emma, not even people from my old Seattle life, would be able to trace the trail back to me. It was strange, how easy it was to vanish when you finally stopped trying to be seen. Packing the last of my belongings took a single evening. 3 suitcases, 1 backpack, and a medium-sized box filled with the only objects I still felt connected to. My grandfather's camera, the quilt he made, a few journals, and a tiny wooden model of Mount Rainier he carved for me when I was 12. Everything else stayed behind, the decorative pieces my mother insisted on, the throw pillows Emma claimed I needed for aesthetic, the kitchenware they bought on a whim, even the wine glasses my parents purchase for when we visit, because you won't know what to buy. Let them think those things were theirs. Let them walk into an empty shell and realize the truth. They never owned any part of me, not even my things. As for their personal items, the tools, the forgotten clothes, the boxes Emma left, just for a month, the moving company had already placed them neatly into a truck and driven them toward a storage facility in Boise. They would receive a notice eventually, telling them where their things were and how to access them. They would not, however, receive a reason. On my final night in the house, silence settled over the rooms like dust. I walked through every space, one last time: the living room where I spent holidays alone, the kitchen where I learned to cook for myself, the bedroom where I cried after phone calls, the office where I wrote down every financial step that led me here. None of it hurt. Not anymore. In the center of the kitchen island, I placed a sheet of crisp, white paper. One sentence, written in the neatest handwriting I could manage. A burden did this, not to mock them, not to taunt them, but to give them the exact truth they had created. The burden they despised became the one thing they could no longer control. At exactly 4:43 a.m., the rideshare pulled up. The sky outside was still dark, the air sharp with early morning chill. I took one final breath, turned the key in the lock, and listened to the soft click that ended this chapter of my life. I slid the key into a padded envelope marked for Carmen, then placed it in the drop box outside her office on the way to the airport. No ceremony. No goodbye texts. No explanations. Seattle faded behind me as the car headed towards SeaTac Airport. Streetlights blurred into streaks of gold outside the window, and for the first time in months, maybe years, my chest felt light. By the time my plane lifted off the runway, I realized something profound. I wasn't disappearing. I wasn't running away. I was finally stepping into a life that belonged to me. And the people who once called me a burden would soon discover that burdens, when they decide to set themselves down, leave an emptiness no one is prepared to face. Their plane landed at SeaTac Airport on a bright, bustling afternoon, the kind of day when travelers spill through terminals with jet-lagged smiles and shopping bags full of souvenirs. My phone buzzed at 2:17 p.m. A message from my mother lit up the screen. "Mom, come pick us up." I stared at the message while sitting on the balcony of my new apartment in Boulder, Colorado, sunlight warming my legs, the flatirons rising in the distance like quiet, ancient guardians. I didn't respond. I didn't even feel the urge to. It was strange how silence, once a weapon they used against me, had become my refuge. Another buzz. "Mom, Lily? We're waiting." Then, "Emma, don't make this difficult. We're tired. Hurry." I heaven says. I turned my phone face down on the table. The breeze picked up, fluttering the edge of the blanket wrapped around my shoulders. They were hours away, states away, and mentally miles away from realizing their world was about to shift beneath them. By 3:08 p.m., according to later timestamps I would see in Emma's videos, they arrived at the house. The Uber driver helped them unload suitcases, 3 enormous ones belonging to Emma, 2 rolling carry-ons for my parents, plus several shopping bags filled with Japanese cosmetics, snacks, and souvenirs they would later claim were gifts for me. They walked up the front steps, laughing, energized from travel, already imagining the welcome they expected. My father carried himself with the casual confidence of a man who believed every door would always open for him. My mother adjusted her scarf, smoothed her hair, and sighed dramatically. "Finally home," she said as though she owned the air around her. Emma, dressed in a designer coat she couldn't afford, lifted her phone and immediately started live streaming. "Hey guys," she chirped to her followers. "Guess where we are? Seattle, baby." She turned the camera toward the house. "About to move into my sister's place, well, our place soon. It's been a whole thing, but we're back from Japan and I'm so excited to finally decorate my new home." "My new home." She declared it like a fact, as if speaking it aloud would manifest ownership. The comments scrolled quickly. "Oh my god, congrats. That view is insane. Wait, your sister's giving you her house?" Iconic queen behavior. Emma basked in the attention, tossing her hair, smirking like the world was unfolding exactly as it should. Then came the moment. My father reached into his pocket, pulled out the familiar silver key, and slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. He frowned, tried again. Nothing. He jiggled it, pressed harder, shook the handle. Still nothing. "Did you forget how to use a key?" Emma teased him, still live streaming. My father ignored her, focused now, jaw tightening. He tried again. And again. And again. By the 5th attempt, my mother stepped forward. "Give it to me." She snatched the key, rammed it in with unnecessary force, and twisted. The lock remained unmoved, silent, indifferent to her frustration. She tried again. And again. 12 attempts in total, 12 increasingly desperate, frantic turns of metal against metal. Emma lowered her phone finally, confusion, overtaking arrogance. "Why isn't it working?" My mother's voice rose sharply. She changed the lock. As if the locksmith should have asked her permission. As if the house still belonged to her. My father stepped back, breathing hard. This must be a mistake. There was no mistake. There had never been a mistake. Only entitlement. Emma stomped her foot. "Call her, now." They called. 11 times. My phone lit up again and again on the small table beside me in Colorado. I didn't pick up. I didn't watch it ring. I didn't owe them even a second of explanation. After nearly half an hour of trying to force the key, my father finally called a locksmith. The man arrived, asked for identification, listened to my mother's dramatic story about their daughter being forgetful, and reluctantly began the work. The live stream resumed. "She must have had some issue with the lock," Emma said to her viewers, voice bright but eyes uncertain. "It's fine, we'll get in soon." "Is center Jai?" Comments poured in. Why would she change it? Maybe something happened? This is weird. Emma ignored them. Finally, the click. The soft, mechanical surrender of a lock giving way. They rushed in. And then they stopped. The camera captured it all. Unfiltered. The house was completely empty. Not a couch. Not a dish. Not a candle. Not a photograph. Not a throw pillow, nor a blanket, nor a mug. The echo of their footsteps filled the space where their entitlement once lived. Emma gasped loudly. "Where's all the furniture? Where's my stuff?" My mother cupped her hand over her mouth. She couldn't. My father walked in slow circles, disbelief twisting his features. This place was full. Where is everything? Gone. Every item. Every trace. Everything had been moved out days earlier and sent exactly where it belonged, far away from them. On the kitchen island sat a single sheet of paper. Emma spotted it first. "What's that?" My mother picked it up. Her hands trembled. The note said, "Surprise, a burden did this." 14 letters. 1 sentence. A mirror held up to everything they had said behind my back. Emma's live stream froze as her jaw dropped. My mother's face drained of color. My father finally understood that the daughter they underestimated had not broken, she had vanished. And this time, they were the ones left standing in the emptiness they created. Back in Colorado, I watched the sunset spill across the mountains, warm and quiet. My phone buzzed again. And again. And again. I didn't reach for it. I didn't need to. Because, for the first time in my life, their voices couldn't reach the place I had finally learned to build for myself. A home where I belonged. A life they could no longer enter. A silence they could never reclaim. The meltdown began before they even left the driveway. When the shock of the empty house settled into something sharper, something humiliating, undeniable, irreversible, the phone calls started. First 1, then 3, then 10. My phone vibrated across the kitchen counter of my Boulder apartment like it was trying to walk away. I didn't answer a single call. But the voicemails kept coming, some shrill with anger, some trembling with panic, some dripping with guilt-laced manipulation. If their emotions had been plotted on a graph, it would have looked like a heart monitor gone violently wrong. My mother went first. "Lily, what did you do? Call me back right now. We are your family. You can't just steal everything." Then came the curses, words she always claimed she never used, because she was a Christian woman. Apparently Christianity took a day off. My father's messages followed. "Lily, this isn't funny. You've embarrassed us. Perforta Joe. You're acting irrational. You need to come home and undo this. Undo this." As if my life were a temporary mistake I could rewind. Then Emma's messages arrived. Dozens of them. "You ruined everything. You knew I was planning to move there. You're such a jealous little freak. You stole my future. You stole the house. You owe me a house." Then the crying messages. Then the screaming. Then the threats. "We will take legal action. We will sue you. You can't hide." It's seeped into though. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. But meltdown phase 2 unfolded publicly. Within an hour, Emma posted a long, dramatic Facebook rant. A full novella. A masterpiece of distortion. "My own sister betrayed me," it began. "She stole the house we were supposed to share, my chance to build my future. I always supported her, but she turned around and left us homeless after our trip." Homeless. The woman lived in my parents' guest room. Comments poured in, not all sympathetic. "Wait, wasn't it her house? Why did you think you would get it? This sounds like entitlement." Emma replied to every negative comment with claws out. "You don't know the full story. She promised it. She owes us." The unraveling had begun. That evening, my mother sent the most theatrical text yet. "We will sue." It was almost funny, considering they had no legal claim whatsoever. I forwarded the messages to Carmen. She replied 3 minutes later, "I'll handle this." And she did. An hour later, she sent my family a single email. "Miss Hart owes you nothing. You hold no legal, financial, or ownership interest in the property or assets referenced. Do not contact her again regarding these claims. C. Willis, Esquire." 5 lines that sliced clean through every argument they had tried to form. My parents read it multiple times, enough to screenshot, forward, and complain to extended family, but nothing changed the simple truth. They had no power left. Still, denial has a way of making people do ridiculous things. 2 days later, they showed up at a major law firm in Seattle, demanding representation. I know this because the receptionist, an old coworker's cousin, sent me a shocked DM. They came in yelling about inheritance and ownership rights. The attorneys rejected them instantly. There's no will, no deed, no contract, nothing ties you to them financially. My mother reportedly slammed her purse onto the counter and screamed, "But it's our daughter. We deserve something." To which the attorney replied, "That's not how property law works." Dawn dime. They left furious, faces red, Emma storming ahead like a toddler denied a toy. But the humiliation wasn't over. Next, they went to my former workplace. Security footage, which, yes, I later saw because friends don't let friends miss family meltdowns, showed my father demanding to speak with HR, shouting, "She lied to us and stole our home." My mother waved papers, printouts of emails, screenshots, who knows what, and insisted they help locate me. Emma, wearing sunglasses indoors, kept shouting, "She scammed us. She owes us. We sacrificed everything for her. which was interesting, considering their sacrifice included a fully paid luxury trip to Japan. Security escorted them out within 10 minutes. The guard's report read, trespassing, harassing employees, claimed ownership of former employees' residence with no proof. They were embarrassed. They were confused. They were furious. But beneath it all, they were afraid, because for the first time in their lives, they were standing face to face with the truth. They had no control over me. They never did. They just assumed they did because I never pushed back. But once a burden learns to lift itself, the ones leaning hardest are the first to fall. Back in Colorado, I watched it all unfold through messages from distant cousins, screenshots from former coworkers, and the occasional forwarded meltdown video from Emma's oversharing social media trail. I didn't celebrate. I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. I simply breathed. A deep, quiet breath that tasted like freedom. The kind of breath you only learn to take once you've stopped suffocating yourself to keep others comfortable. They weren't done, not yet. But for the first time, their chaos felt far away. Like a storm I had finally stepped out of. And I wasn't going back. 3 weeks passed quietly, so quietly that for a moment, I allowed myself to believe the storm had finally burned itself out. I settled into a gentle Colorado routine, morning coffee on my balcony, evening walks under the flatirons, weekends spent exploring trails my grandfather would have loved. My new life was small, peaceful, and almost painfully normal. And then one ordinary, Thursday afternoon, the past found me. It started with a knock, not just any knock. A furious, pounding knock that rattled the metal frame of my apartment door like someone was trying to break in. I froze. No one in Colorado knew my family. No one had my new number. No one, absolutely no one, should have known where I lived. My heart hammered as the voices outside grew clearer. Open the door, Lily. If you was. You can't hide forever. You owe us a conversation. My mother's shrill tone pierced through the hallway. Emma's voice followed, louder, angrier. My father barked out something I couldn't make out. They found me. Somehow, impossibly, they found me. Later, I would learn exactly how. Emma had hired a discount private investigator, a man who clearly didn't understand the legal boundaries of his profession, and paid him to track down a missing sister. He pieced together scraps from old addresses, online traces I'd forgotten to erase, and social media tags from unsuspecting mutuals. And now they were standing outside my apartment door. I stayed perfectly, still listening, evaluating. Running wasn't necessary. Panic wasn't useful. Instead, I walked calmly to the lobby phone, connected to the front desk, and said 5 steady words. Please call the police. Now. -5. The concierge didn't ask questions. Colorado staff had seen enough breakups, stalkers, and custody battles to recognize danger when it presented itself screaming in a hallway. He called the police immediately. I stayed inside, door locked, heart steadying itself beat by beat. Outside, my mother continued pounding. Emma shouted something about rights. My father threatened legal action again. By the time the police arrived, 5 officers in total, the scene had escalated. My mother was on the ground, crying dramatically. Emma was kicking the door, and my father was arguing with a resident who told them to shut up. The officers stepped in quickly. 2 approached my family. 1 knocked gently on my door. 2 more stood watch down the hallway. I opened the door only a crack at first, enough to confirm the uniforms, the badges, the authority that stood between me and the chaos that had chased me across state lines. Ma'am, are you Lily Hart? One asked. Yes, I said quietly. Are you safe? I nodded. They're not allowed here. They're harassing me. Understood. We'll speak with them now. I stepped back as the officer joined the others. The hallway was a storm, voices rising, accusations flying, neighbors peeking from cracked doors, but the police quickly took control. Ma'am, one officer said to my mother. You cannot come to someone's residence uninvited. She's our daughter. My mother yelled. We have every right to be here. I think you would. No, you don't. The officer replied, firm and calm. Emma cut in, pointing aggressively at me, as though I were a criminal caught in the act. She owes us a house. She stole it. She ran away after my mom had to force her to sign. That was it. The sentence that changed everything. Mom had to force her to sign. Epke. The words burst out of Emma with the emotional intelligence of a toddler throwing a tantrum in Target. The officers paused. Their eyes sharpened, suddenly alert. One officer repeated, slowly. You said your mother forced her to sign something? Emma blinked, confused. Yeah, obviously. She was being dramatic and difficult. My mom had to push her to sign the papers. She owes us. The officer held up a hand. Ma'am. Coercion in financial matters is a serious allegation. My mother paled instantly. No, we didn't force, she was being unreasonable. My father stepped forward. This is a misunderstanding. But the officers had heard what mattered. Everyone. Hands where we can see them. We need to separate you. They moved quickly. Professionalism cutting through the chaos like a scalpel. One officer turned toward me. Miss Hart, do you want to file a report for harassment or coercion? I shook my head. I just want them to leave me alone. He nodded. That's enough for us to proceed. The twist came next, unexpected even to me. Given what was stated, one officer explained, we're required to notify Adult Protective Services. Coercion involving family and finances, especially when there's evidence a vulnerable individual may have been pressured, is grounds for investigation. My mother's jaw dropped. She's not vulnerable, she's manipulative. She's our daughter, my father shouted. Emma burst into another rant about rights and deserving the house. But the officers were done listening. They escorted my family away from my door, guiding them down the hallway as my mother cried loudly. My father's face flushed purple with rage. And Emma protested at top volume that this was all backwards. Before leaving, one officer returned to me and spoke softly. Miss Hart, they will not be allowed to contact you directly during the investigation. If they attempt to find you or harass you again, call us immediately. I nodded. Do you understand? For your safety, they cannot reach out to you in any way. I took a breath, a long, slow exhale. I felt down to my bones. Yes, I said, I understand. The officer gave a small, respectful nod. And then they were gone, my family being escorted out of the building like strangers who had crossed a line they didn't even know existed until it snapped beneath their feet. I closed my door gently, leaned against it, and let the silence settle. Not the silence of abandonment. Not the silence of being ignored. But the silence of finally being free from the people who mistook my kindness for weakness. Their downfall came from their own mouths. Their humiliation came from their own entitlement. Their consequences came from their own choices. And, for the first time, I didn't have to defend myself. The truth did it for me. 6 months passed slowly at first, then all at once, the way seasons seem to change when you're not measuring life by crisis anymore. Colorado had become home in a way I never expected. Not because it was where I planned to stay forever, but because it was the first place where my life was built by choice, not obligation. My days had a rhythm now, quiet, gentle, mine. Most mornings, I woke before sunrise, laced up my boots, and hiked the trails behind my apartment. Colorado mountains are different from Washington's, more open, more golden, more honest. They don't hide behind forests or fog. They rise unapologetically, all edges and sunlight, and somehow standing beneath them helped me rise in the same way. Breathing in the cold air as I climbed those ridges, I felt something I had never truly felt growing up. Expansiveness. Room to exist. Room to be. Room to take up space, without being expected to give it away. I found a new job at a logistics firm in Boulder, a modest role compared to what I held in Seattle, but stability wasn't what I was seeking. I wanted simplicity, autonomy, a fresh start away from people who saw me as a resource rather than a person. My colleagues were kind, my work was appreciated, and for once, I went home feeling enough. My apartment was small, nothing like the house in Seattle, but it was warm, filled with soft light, scattered books, and the scent of coffee beans I ground every morning. My grandfather's quilt lived on my couch now, a piece of him wrapped around me whenever evenings grew cold. This home wasn't impressive. It wasn't grand. But it didn't need to be. It was mine fully, freely, without strings or expectations or someone waiting to take it away. But healing is never a solitary act. It reaches outward. 3 months after moving, I found myself attending a community meeting at a local library, an open discussion about financial abuse within families. I went out of curiosity, thinking I would sit quietly in the back. Instead, I found a room full of people whose stories mirrored my own in echoing ways: inheritances stolen, savings drained, homes signed over under pressure, parents who weaponized guilt, siblings who believed they deserved everything simply by existing. For the first time, my pain wasn't a private shame. It was part of a pattern, one I hadn't caused and wasn't alone in. When someone asked if anyone else wanted to share, I lifted my hand without overthinking. And I talked. Not about the house or the money or the note I left behind, but about the years of feeling small. The decades of being told I owed something I never owed. The moment I overheard the words, "she's a burden." The clarity that came with choosing myself for the first time. My voice trembled only once. When I finished, the room was quiet, not in pity, but in recognition. Afterward, 3 people approached me. Then 5. Then 8. They asked if I could speak again at another session, or maybe lead a small group, or simply meet for coffee. It wasn't planned, but it grew, not because I advertised it, but because people passed my name along in whispers. She understands. She's lived it. She doesn't judge. I started hosting informal workshops, free, small gatherings where we talked about boundaries, financial autonomy, emotional disentanglement, and the quiet courage of walking away. The work wasn't grand. It wasn't glamorous. But it was real. And it mattered. A local journalist heard about the workshops through a friend who attended. She asked if she could interview me for a feature on hidden forms of family abuse. I hesitated, old instincts warning me to stay invisible, but something in me said yes. The article came out 2 weeks later in a Sunday digital edition. Reclaiming Independence: How One Woman's Escape Helped Others Find Their Own Strength. It wasn't sensational. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply honest. And reading it, I felt something loosen inside me, something old, something heavy. One evening, after a workshop ended and the participants filtered out with soft goodbyes, I sat at home with a cup of tea and opened the drawer of my bedside table. Inside was my grandfather's journal, small, leather-bound, full of worn pages and quiet wisdom. I flipped to a page marked with a folded corner. A passage I had underlined years ago stared back at me. What you give is not always what is returned, but you always have the right to walk toward the light. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest. He had seen me long before anyone else had. He had prepared me for a life they could no longer steal. He had known I would need courage, not to fight, but to walk away. A smile stretched across my face, small, tired, but whole. I am not a burden. I never was. What I carried all those years wasn't my own weight, it was the weight of a toxic family, convinced that taking from me was their right. And now? I have set that weight down. I have stepped into the light he wrote about. I have begun again, not as the daughter who is never enough, not as the sister expected to give everything, but as a woman who finally understands her worth. To anyone listening, to anyone who has ever been wounded by the people meant to love them first, you are not the debt they demand you pay. You are not the role they assign you. You are not responsible for the stories they invent to justify their cruelty. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to choose yourself. And when you finally set down the burden that was never yours to carry, you will be amazed by how light freedom feels.